This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
And how we produce and consume food is probably the most significant impact both on planet and society. In recent years, there was an indifference to these issues. I woke up to it in 1984 when violence erupted in the state of Punjab, which is the land of 5 rivers, prosperous, hardworking farmers. The Green Revolution was first implemented in Punjab. It was even given a Nobel Peace Prize with the thesis that changing the seeds and adapting them to chemicals is going to create so much prosperity that there will be peace. And the color green did not come from the philosophy green. There was no philosophy green in the 60s. The green movement grew much later as a sustainability movement. Green was just a color different from red. And red is what you didn't want. And the idea was you engineer the seeds, you engineer society, and there'll be peace ever after. But there wasn't peace in Punjab. That same year, in the city of Bhopal, a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide leaked. And I rushed in with bucketfuls of neem saplings, beautiful tree, whose scientific name is Azadirachta and indica, which has been used for centuries in India for pest control. And I drew a poster, "No more Bhopals, let's plant a neem." But by the end of that year, I was asking myself, why is the model of agriculture that is dominant causing so much violence? And I was working at that point on a major program for the United Nations University on conflicts over natural resources. And I said, I think there are conflicts that are deeper than the ones that are being reported on. And will you let me investigate? They did. I wrote a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution as a result. And while doing the research for the book, half the time my field trips had to be canceled because the train had been blown up or the bus had been blown up with a bomb. But I persisted and finally did the research. And I remember in particular a declaration of the Sharbat Khalsa, which is the big body of the Sikhs, saying, when you can't choose what you grow, when you can't decide the methods of production, when you don't determine the price of what you've produced, when your own rivers, water can't be released through your decision, because the Bhakra Dam was controlled by Delhi, then we are living under slavery. And the reason they came out with this was because the Green Revolution by the 80s was going into a negative economy. Farmers were getting into debt. There were more pests. There was more pesticide use. The nitrogen fertilizer was having to be used more and more with no gain in yield. Right now, the yields are going down that much. The soils were dying. The water was disappearing. The farmers were angry. And they took to the gun. There were protests. The protests weren't listened to. Why is so much water being wasted and misused? Because whether it's in Syria or in India, crops that use less water have been displaced. Whether it is drought-resistant rices, or barley or wheat, or the millets, which I call the foods of the future. The millets are the most nutritious crops. You think they're just bird food. No, they are authentic human food. We did a calculation that if we grew millet, we would have 400 times more food using the same amount of water in India. The Green Revolution, which is based on chemicals, is water intensive. Not for the plants, but for the chemicals. Uses 10 times more water. globally, between 75% to 95% of the water in different countries is going into an intensive agriculture, which is not bringing us any gains in food security. In fact, it's undermining food security by destroying water availability, because the limiting factor for the production of food is not limits of land. We've got so much land. But the land is not always able to grow food because of limits on water. And in desert cultures, the indigenous people of this land, or in Rajasthan, or the semi-arid tracts of the Deccan, farmers evolved the most amazing ways of conserving water and using less. Now, of course, there's a lot of fashion about crop per drop, but it's not yet at the systems level, where you have ecosystems conserving more water and using less. I have seen, of course, on the flights to this country, sometimes napkins served that say, we put more water back than we take. Now, that is arithmetically impossible. But Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola try and convince us that they are creators of water. So water-wise, these systems were hugely non-sustainable. And because we have developed very reductionist, mechanistic ways of thinking about the world since the Industrial Revolution, and these have been defined as the only way you can approach science, though we have now the advantage of the birth of ecological sciences all over, at no point was a response made in terms of food democracy. Not in Syria, not in India, not in Sudan, not in Nigeria. Every conflict we see around the world today that is defined as a religious conflict has at its roots resource use. And how we grow food is the single biggest determinant of resource use. Most people in the world farm. Because we use the figures of how much of humanity lives in cities, we forget that in most of Africa, 90 to 95% people are involved in agriculture, most of them women. So narrowing it down into a conflict based on religion, we then create an amazing narrative of enemies out there. I wish President Obama was not sending drones and fighter jets to drop bombs, but was allowing Syria and Iraq, which gave agriculture to the world, to be able to rejuvenate their biodiversity, to be able to rejuvenate their agriculture.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.